A single dad worked quietly in a big community hall where a charity event was happening that evening. He was one of those people who arrived before everyone else and left after everyone was gone. He never complained about the long hours or the heavy work. He just kept moving, cleaning the stage, arranging chairs, checking lights, and making sure everything looked perfect. Most people barely noticed him because workers like him blended into the background. They were important, but hardly anyone paid attention. He had a small daughter who often came with him to these events because he couldn't leave her alone at home. She sat on a chair in a corner with her school bag, doing drawings or homework while watching her father work. She liked coming with him, not because the hall was fun, but because she loved seeing how much effort her father put into everything. He did all of this so she could have a better future. On this particular day, the hall was louder and busier than usual. Performers were setting up their equipment, volunteers were rushing around, and the organizers were trying to make everything run smoothly. In the middle of the stage stood a large, shiny piano. It was meant for a special performance later that night. The piano looked expensive, polished, and heavy, something only trained musicians touched. The single dad moved around it very carefully while sweeping the stage. He wiped dust from the piano legs and made sure no cables were lying around. He treated it with a kind of silent respect, as if he understood that it was more than just an instrument. What no one knew was that he had once dreamed of becoming a pianist when he was younger. He used to practice for hours, imagining himself on a stage like this. But life changed suddenly when he became a single parent. Those dreams slowly faded as responsibilities took over. He still loved music, but it became something he enjoyed quietly at home late at night. After his daughter fell asleep, as people rushed around, he didn't draw attention to himself. He didn't tell anyone he could play. He didn't want eyes on him, and he didn't want pity. He was just there to do his job. But the day had something else planned for him. A few hours before the event started, something unexpected happened. The sound system began malfunctioning. Microphones stopped working, speakers gave strange buzzing noises, and the organizers started panicking. They needed every performance to run smoothly because the show was being recorded. The host walked around trying to calm everyone, but the tension in the hall kept rising. While all this chaos was happening, the single dad kept doing his work. He stayed calm, pushing equipment aside, fixing chairs, and clearing space on stage. He didn't interfere with the sound team because they seemed stressed enough. But while wiping the piano surface, a volunteer walked by and joked lightly, "You're always around this piano. Maybe you should play something to pass the time." The dad smiled shyly and shook his head. He didn't want anyone to think he was pretending to be something he was not. The volunteer walked away laughing, not knowing that the joke wasn't entirely wrong. His daughter, who had heard the comment, came closer and tugged gently on his shirt. In a soft voice only he could hear, she said, "Papa, I know you can play." He looked down at her and tried to smile. "Not now," he whispered. "I'm just here to work." But she didn't let go of the thought. She knew her father better than anyone. She had heard him play at home sometimes, especially on nights when he thought she was asleep. His music had emotion, feelings he never spoke out loud. She knew he had talent, even if he never talked about it. Meanwhile, the sound delay kept getting longer. Performers were stuck backstage waiting for things to be fixed. The audience, who had already started entering the hall, looked confused. The host tried stalling with small talk, but the crowd was slowly getting restless. Seeing the tension, the dad's daughter bravely walked up to the host and whispered something. The host looked surprised for a second, then turned and looked toward the dad. The father froze for a moment, unsure what she had said. The host walked up to him with a friendly smile and said loudly enough for the audience to hear, "Hey, could you help us test the piano while the sound team works? Just press a few keys. Anything will help." The dad's heart began beating fast. He wasn't expecting this. He looked at his daughter, who gave him a tiny nod of encouragement. The hall suddenly felt bigger than ever. People were watching. He didn't like attention, but refusing would make things awkward. And his daughter's hopeful eyes told him that maybe it was time to take a tiny step forward. So he slowly walked toward the piano. The audience didn't react much. some thinking he was a technician or just a worker checking if the instrument was connected properly. A few whispered, wondering why a stage cleaner was sitting at the huge piano. Others looked amused, expecting nothing to happen. He hesitated before sitting down. The piano bench felt strange under him, like it belonged to someone else. His hands trembled a little as he lifted the cover off the keys. It had been a long time since he had touched a real piano like this one that felt alive. Elegant and full of stories, he placed his fingers gently on the keys. His daughter watched from the side, hands clasped together, silently cheering for him. The hall grew quieter as people noticed he wasn't just tapping random keys. His posture, his focus, the way his fingers rested lightly, it all hinted that he knew what he was doing. The audience waited. Performers backstage peeked from curtains. A few volunteers stood still, curious. How could someone who worked silently in the background suddenly be the center of attention? He closed his eyes for a second, taking a deep breath. All the memories of his younger days came back, those long evenings practicing, dreaming of something bigger, the weight of life changing everything, and the way music had always been his escape. He didn't know if he would be perfect. He didn't even know if he could finish a full piece. But he wanted to play, just once, in front of the daughter who believed in him more than he believed in himself. And then, with the smallest movement, he pressed the first note. It rang through the hall soft. Clear, full of emotion. The sound technician turned to listen. A couple of people in the audience leaned forward. It wasn't a random tap. It wasn't a test. It was the beginning of something beautiful. He moved his fingers again, playing a gentle melody that flowed like a story. It wasn't flashy or loud. It didn't need to be. It carried warmth, struggle, and hope, feelings that came from years of living quietly, working silently, and loving deeply. The hall got even quieter. The host, who moments ago was stressed, now watched with surprise. The daughter's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't wipe them. She was proud. Really proud. In that moment, the single dad didn't look like a stage worker. He didn't look tired or unnoticed. He looked like someone who had carried a long-lost talent inside him and finally allowed it to breathe again. He kept playing, unaware of how many people he had already touched with his music. The melody grew richer, filling the whole place with something pure and honest. Even though the sound system wasn't fully working, his piano didn't need microphones. Every note reached the audience clearly, as if the hall was built just for this moment. And while he continued to play, the organizers, the audience, and his own daughter realized something. The show had not been interrupted. It had just begun in the most unexpected way. The hall was so quiet that the single dad could hear his own breathing between the notes. His fingers moved carefully as if they were remembering a long-forgotten language. Some people in the audience had stopped talking mid-sentence. Others had their phones halfway out, unsure whether to record or just watch. No one expected a gentle, heart-touching melody to come from a man who had been sweeping the stage only minutes ago. His daughter stood near the side curtain, almost holding her breath. She knew her father could play, but she had never seen him like this, calm, focused, and lost in the moment. His eyes remained half-closed while his hands danced across the keys. It didn't feel like he was performing for applause. It felt like he was simply letting his feelings speak for the first time in a long time. The melody grew fuller, deeper. Each note carried something inside it, memories of nights when he sat alone practicing while his daughter slept. Moments when he wished he could follow his musical dream again. And the quiet strength he built as a single parent, working long hours to take care of his child. Every emotion flowed into the music without him needing to say a word. People backstage had stopped preparing for their own performances. Even the famous young pianist who was supposed to play that night stood still, watching with wide eyes. He wasn't expecting competition from a stage worker. He certainly wasn't expecting to feel goosebumps from a melody so simple yet so powerful. But he did. As the dad continued playing, the audience began taking out their phones, not to distract him, but to save this moment. The camera flashes didn't bother him. He was in his own world, and the piano was the only thing he could hear. For a few minutes, the stress of life disappeared. and he felt like the younger version of himself, the boy who once dreamed of sitting on a big stage like this. The music shifted slightly, becoming softer. People leaned forward to listen more closely. His fingers slowed down but didn't lose their grace. It was as if he wanted to say something through the melody, something he'd never said out loud. Maybe it was the struggle he went through while raising his daughter alone. Maybe it was the fear he carried every day, fear of failing, fear of not giving her enough, fear of life slipping away. Or maybe it was simply gratitude because even though he faced difficulties, he still had her and she still believed in him. When he played the final note, it hung in the hall like a warm breeze. And then silence fell again, this time even deeper. For a moment, nobody clapped. They were still processing what they had heard. But then, almost like a wave, the applause started from one corner of the hall. It grew louder, stronger, until the whole audience stood on their feet. It wasn't a polite clap. It was loud, heartfelt, and full of admiration. The single dad looked up, confused, as if he didn't understand why people were reacting like this. He stood up slowly from the piano bench, unsure what to do. Applause wasn't something he was used to. Usually no one noticed when he finished his work. Usually no one thanked him. Now hundreds of people were clapping for him like he was the star of the night. His daughter ran onto the stage and wrapped her arms around him. She was crying, not because she was sad, but because she was proud, more proud than ever before. She whispered, "This is your moment, Papa." He held her close, unable to say anything. His eyes were wet too, but he blinked quickly to hide it. The host walked back on stage, smiling widely. He addressed the audience, saying, "We asked him to test the piano. We didn't know we had discovered a hidden gem tonight." The crowd cheered again. The single dad felt his face turn red. He didn't like attention, but he couldn't deny that something inside him felt alive again, something he had buried for years. The organizers walked up, thanking him for helping them during the delay. One of them asked if he could play officially as part of the show. He hesitated, unsure if he was good enough to share the stage with trained musicians. But his daughter squeezed his hand, giving him silent courage, and he nodded. He didn't play a huge piece. Just a simple tune he remembered from his younger days. But people listened as if it was something rare and precious. They weren't hearing just music. They were hearing a story of resilience, love, and quiet strength. The melody came from a man who had no spotlight in life, yet shone brighter than anyone expected that night. After the performance ended, and the show moved on, people kept coming up to him backstage. Some wanted to shake his hand. Others wanted to tell him how his music touched them. A music teacher approached him, offering free lessons if he ever wanted to play more seriously again. A volunteer told him she would never forget the way he played. Even the young pianist complimented him, saying his music had heart, something not everyone could produce. The dad didn't know how to respond to all the attention. He kept smiling shyly and thanking people quietly. He wasn't used to praise. He wasn't used to being seen. But deep inside, he felt grateful. Not because of the applause, but because he finally shared a piece of himself with the world, something he always kept hidden. When the event ended and the hall began to empty, he packed his cleaning tools like he always did. Nothing about his job changed. The only thing that changed was the way people looked at him. They didn't see him as just a worker anymore. They saw him as someone talented, someone special. But instead of letting it go to his head, he stayed humble. He believed life had already taught him enough lessons to stay grounded. As he and his daughter walked out of the hall, she held his hand tightly. Streetlights lit up the quiet road outside. He carried her backpack on his shoulder while she skipped beside him, still excited about what she had seen. "Papa," she said softly, "why did you stop playing before?" He paused for a second, thinking of all the reasons: responsibility, work, raising her alone, bills, exhaustion. But he didn't want to talk about struggles at that moment. So he simply said, "Life became busy." His daughter nodded, then said, "But you should play again. You're really good." He smiled, touched by her confidence in him. "Maybe I will," he said. "Maybe it's time." When they reached home, he placed his tools in their usual corner and sat down at the small old keyboard he kept near the window. His daughter came and sat next to him on a stool. He played a soft tune, nothing complicated, but he played it with a calm heart. It felt different now, lighter, freer. His daughter leaned her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. "This sounds like home," she whispered. He kept playing, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, a quiet joy, in the days that followed. The video of him playing at the event began spreading online. People were touched by his humility and talent. Some offered him opportunities. Some just left kind messages. But he didn't rush toward any sudden fame. He stayed focused on his life, his daughter, and his work. Music wasn't a big dream he needed to chase. It was simply a part of him, a part he had brought back to life. Every night after finishing work, he played a little at home. His daughter would draw or study beside him. Sometimes she hummed along. Sometimes she clapped after he finished. Those small moments meant more to him than applause from a large hall the night of the event. Didn't change him in an extreme way. It didn't make him rich or famous. But it reminded him that dreams don't disappear just because life becomes difficult. They stay somewhere inside, waiting for the right moment to return. And sometimes all it takes is a small push from someone who loves you to bring them back. He continued working quietly, just like always. But now, whenever he passed the piano at events, volunteers would smile at him differently. Performers greeted him with respect. And his daughter looked at him as not just her father, but also the man who could make a whole hall silent with his music. Life didn't magically become perfect. But something inside him felt whole again, and that was more than enough.